He was a man drowning in silence. The silence of his ranch, a sprawling, empty thing under a sky too big and too quiet. The silence of his house where the clocks ticked too loud and the floorboards held their breath. But worst of all was the silence of his daughters. They were twins, 8 years old, and they hadn't spoken a single word in 42 days. Their names were Grace and Willa, but they were no longer girls. They were ghosts. Porcelain dolls with wide, glassy eyes that saw nothing you wanted them to see. On day 29, Willa had stopped eating. Now, Grace was following. They lay curled together in a corner of the nursery, pale as bone. Their knees pulled tight to their chests, breathing so shallow you had to lean in close just to make sure they were still there. They didn't cry. They didn't fuss. They just disappeared. Right in front of him. Eli Carrion, their father, had tried everything. Doctors who spoke of shock and trauma, priests who spoke of prayer and faith, and nannies, so many nannies. The first one lasted 6 days. She left in tears, saying the house was haunted by a sadness she couldn't fight. The second lasted 4 days. She claimed the girls stared right through her, like she was already dead. The third didn't even make it to sundown. She packed her bag after one look into the nursery and said some things were beyond fixing. Then came Clara. She arrived on a Tuesday with the dust of the road on her worn leather boots and a single small carpet bag in her hand. She wasn't like the others. She didn't offer nervous smiles or empty reassurances. She just looked Eli in the eye, her own gaze steady and unnervingly calm, and gave a single nod. He hired her with a glance. Words weren't necessary. He was out of them anyway. He led her to the nursery. He opened the door and stood back, his jaw tight, his hat clenched in his big, calloused hands, waiting for her to run like all the rest. Clara stepped inside. She saw the 2 small forms in the corner. She saw the untouched tray of food on the floor. She saw the despair clinging to the curtains like mold. She saw it all in 5 seconds, and she didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, she knelt down slowly, her movements fluid and quiet. From her bag, she pulled a small, hand-carved wooden horse. It was simple, worn smooth with time. She placed it on the braided rug, right in the sliver of sunlight between her and the girls. She didn't offer it to them. She didn't say a word. She just set it down. A little piece of the outside world dropped into their tomb of silence. Grace's eyes flickered toward it. Just for a second, a twitch. It was more than Eli had gotten in a month. Clara didn't try to coax them. She didn't try to feed them. She simply moved to the far wall, sat down with her back against the floral wallpaper, and pulled out a book. It wasn't a children's book. It was a worn old copy of The Secret Garden. She began to read aloud. Her voice was low and steady, not a sing-song nanny voice, but the voice of someone reading for themselves. A sound that didn't ask for anything in return. The girls didn't look at her, but they didn't shrink away either. Downstairs, Eli waited. He paced the length of the kitchen, his boots echoing on the worn floorboards. He didn't know what he was hoping for. A miracle, maybe, or just for the quiet to finally break. He hadn't told Clara about his wife, Jane. He hadn't told her how she died. He hadn't told her about the room at the end of the hall, the one he kept locked. The one he never, ever opened. Some secrets were too heavy to speak. You just carried them until they crushed you. That night, Clara stood on the back porch, watching the moon rise over the distant ridge. The air was cool, smelling of pine and dust. Eli came and stood beside her, not speaking, just sharing the vast, lonely dark. "Do you know what happened to them?" she asked, her voice soft. His jaw worked, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Their mother died. Clara waited. The silence stretched. She was 28, Clara said quietly. That's young. He gave a sharp, single nod. You buried her here, she stated, not a question. She had seen the small, fenced-off plot on the hill, marked by a simple wooden cross. Another nod. Clara didn't push. She understood that silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything you couldn't bear to say out loud. "Good night, Mr. Carrion," she said, turning to go inside. Just as her hand touched the cool brass of the doorknob, his voice stopped her. It was rough, like stones grinding together. "Don't go in her room." Clara paused, her back to him. "Their mothers?" He didn't need to answer. She understood perfectly. Some doors are meant to stay closed. But as she walked up the creaking stairs, she heard something, or thought she did. A faint, whisper-thin melody drifting from under the forbidden door. A lullaby. Her blood went cold. It was a tune she hadn't heard in 20 years. A lullaby her own mother used to sing. To her and to her little sister, Jane. The next morning, Clara walked past the locked door and felt its secrets pulling at her. She was not just a nanny. She was a lie. Her name wasn't Clara. It was Catherine. And Jane Carrion, the dead woman who haunted this house, was her sister. She hadn't seen Jane in 10 years. Not since Jane ran off with a quiet, brooding rancher named Eli Carrion, cutting off all ties with the family who thought he was beneath her. Catherine, Clara, had searched for years. By the time she finally found the ranch, all she found was a gravestone, and 2 nieces she never knew she had, trapped in a silence she knew she had to break. She couldn't tell Eli who she was. He would have thrown her out in a second. He'd hated their family, called them soft city folk who didn't understand the hardness of the world. So Clara became a stranger who carried the key to the very song that haunted his house. For 3 days, she kept her routine. She read from her book, her voice a low hum in the quiet room. She left food on a tray, a slice of bread, a small bowl of stew, an apple. It always went untouched. On the 4th day, she changed tactics. She set a single, perfect peach on the windowsill, letting the morning sun warm it, letting its sweet scent fill the room. She said nothing about it. By day 6, Willa, the smaller of the 2, crawled over to the window. She picked up the peach. She sniffed it. Her small teeth bit into the flesh just once. Then she set it down, half-eaten. It was a victory so small it was almost invisible. But it was there. That night Eli met her on the porch again. He didn't ask how the day went. He could see it in the way she stood, a little less tense, a little less braced for failure. He held out a tin cup. "Whiskey," he said. It was an offering. She took it. "Willa ate," she said softly. "Just a bite." He nodded, staring out at the dark hills. She was always the hungrier one. The words hung in the air, a piece of the past offered up. Clara knew she had to tread carefully. "I think they're waiting," she said, "for permission to move on, for the truth." Eli swallowed his whiskey in one gulp. "The truth is ugly." "The silence is uglier," she countered. He was quiet for a long time. The wind whispered through the pines. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "She was pregnant, lost the baby. After that, she got sick, a sickness in her mind. It just took her." It was the story he told everyone, the story the doctor had put on the certificate. But Clara knew there was more. The locked room, the warning. "I think Grace knows more than you realize," Clara said, "and Willa is following her lead." Eli looked up at the stars, his profile carved out of the darkness. "There's more," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But I can't say it. They're not eating, Eli. They're not sleeping. They are fading away. Whatever is weighing on them is crushing them." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "It's the same thing that's weighing on me." And in that moment, looking at the raw grief on his face, Clara realized a terrifying truth. Eli Carrion wasn't just grieving his wife's death. He was grieving something he had buried right alongside her. Something much, much darker. The next day, Clara decided she couldn't wait any longer. While Eli was out checking the fences, she walked to the end of the hall, to the forbidden door. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a betrayal of his trust, but her nieces were dying. The doorknob was cool and smooth beneath her hand. It turned without a sound. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was preserved, the bed neatly made, a book on the nightstand, a lavender scent clinging to the air. It was a shrine to a ghost. But Clara wasn't looking for ghosts. She was looking for answers. She ran her hands along the walls, under the dresser, beneath the rug. Nothing. She was about to give up when her fingers brushed against a loose floorboard under the bed. Her breath caught. She pried it up. Beneath it, nestled in the dark, dusty space, was not a letter. It was a thick, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't a book of accounts. It was a diary. Jane's diary. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. The first few pages were what she expected. Musings about the ranch, the weather, her love for her quiet, intense husband. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting grew frantic, spidery. October 12th. He's back. I saw him on the Ridge Road. Eli doesn't know. He can never know. God, if Eli finds out Judd is here, he'll kill him. Judd. Eli's half-brother. A cruel, bitter man Jane had written about once, years ago, in a letter home. A man Eli despised. Clara flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. October 19th. Judd came to the house today. Eli was in town. He said he came for what he was owed. He talked about Black Creek. He knows. He knows what we did. He said the debt was never paid. Black Creek. What debt? Clara's mind raced. This was more than a family squabble. This was something else entirely. She turned to the last entry. The date was the day before Jane died. The ink was smeared, as if by tears. He knows about the girls. He says one of them is his. He says he'll take her. Eli will never believe me. He'll see the lie in my eyes. Judd is going to destroy us. He's going to take my baby. There's only one way to keep them safe. To lock the door forever. Clara slammed the book shut. Her body went cold. The story Eli had told her was a lie. The story the whole town believed was a lie. Jane hadn't been taken by a sickness of the mind. She had been running from a monster. And that monster's name was Judd. Suddenly a floorboard creaked behind her. Clara spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Willa stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. She pointed a tiny, trembling finger, not at Clara, but at the corner of the room. The bad man, she whispered. He was in here. The bad man. The words, the first Willa had spoken in weeks, hung in the dusty air of the forbidden room like a death sentence. Clara's blood ran cold. He hadn't just been a threat on the horizon. He had been in this house, in this very room. Willa, Clara whispered, kneeling down. When was the bad man here? Willa's eyes, huge and dark in her pale face, darted toward the window. With Mama! They were yelling. Mama was crying. Clara pulled the little girl into her arms, her mind reeling. Jane hadn't been alone when she died. Judd had been with her, or at least he'd been there shortly before. This changed everything. The locked room wasn't just a scene of grief. It was a crime scene. She had to get to Eli. She had to tell him. She tucked the diary under her arm, took Willa's hand, and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her, sealing the ghost back inside. She found Eli in the barn, mending a harness, his hands working with a slow, methodical rhythm that couldn't mask the tension in his shoulders. Eli, she said, her voice shaking slightly. He looked up. He saw her face, saw Willa clinging to her skirt, and his own face went pale. What is it? What's wrong? Willa spoke, Clara said. She told me someone else was here with Jane, before she died. She held up the diary. I found this. I'm sorry, I went into the room. Eli stared at the leather-bound book as if it were a snake. He didn't seem angry about her betrayal, only terrified of what she held. She called him the bad man, Clara pressed. She said his name was Judd. Eli's face hardened into a mask of stone. He snatched the diary from her hand, his knuckles white. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Where did you find this? Under the floorboards. He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Of course. She was always good at hiding things. He looked past Clara, out the barn door toward the distant Ridge Road, his eyes narrowing. So he's back. He said he was owed a debt, Clara said, her voice dropping. He mentioned a place, Black Creek. The name hit Eli like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his face ashen. The harness fell from his hands. No, he whispered. He wouldn't. After all this time. Eli, what happened at Black Creek? He wouldn't look at her. He looked at the ground, at the walls, at anything but her eyes. It was a long time ago, before Jane, before any of this. His voice was low, haunted. We were young, stupid, we robbed a paymaster's coach. Clara gasped. There was a guard, Eli continued, his voice cracking. Things went wrong. A man ended up dead. Judd took off. I took my share of the money and ran. I used it to buy this ranch, to build a life for Jane. I thought I'd left that world behind. I thought he was gone for good. Suddenly, it all made a terrible kind of sense. The debt wasn't just about land. It was about blood money. Judd wasn't just a bitter brother. He was a partner in crime come to collect. As the weight of his confession settled between them, a new sound cut through the air, the frantic barking of the dogs. Eli's head snapped up. He strode to the barn door and looked out. Clara followed, her heart pounding. A lone rider was cresting the hill. He sat tall in the saddle, a long coat flapping in the wind, his figure silhouetted against the graying sky. He moved with a lazy, arrogant confidence. He rode as if he owned the whole valley. It's him, Eli breathed, his voice flat and dead. It's Judd. The threat was no longer a ghost from a diary. It was here, in the flesh, and it was riding straight for them. Eli shoved Clara back from the doorway. Get the girls, take them to the cellar, bar the door, and do not, under any circumstances, come out until I tell you. Eli, no! Do it! He roared, and the force of it sent a chill down her spine. He turned and grabbed a heavy iron pry bar from the wall. This is my mess. I'll clean it up. He strode out of the barn to meet his past, leaving Clara with the terrifying knowledge that the silence in this house was about to be broken by a violence she couldn't possibly imagine. She grabbed Willa's hand and ran for the house, Grace's silent, terrified face appearing in the kitchen window. The bad man was here, and this time, he might not leave. Clara herded the girls toward the heavy cellar door in the pantry. Grace was frozen, her eyes locked on the window, watching the two men meet in the yard. Willa was trembling, burying her face in Clara's skirt. Go on, Clara urged, pushing them gently toward the dark, steep stairs. It's just a game. We're hiding. But Grace knew better. She looked up at Clara, her eyes ancient with a fear no child should ever know. He's going to hurt Papa. No, he's not, Clara said, her voice firmer than she felt. Your Papa is strong. She shoved a heavy sack of flour against the cellar door once they were inside, plunging them into the cool, musty darkness. She could hear their ragged breaths beside her. Above them, voices, sharp and angry. Judd's voice was a low, mocking drawl. Well, look at you, brother, playing the part of the respectable rancher. You wear it about as well as a pig wears a saddle. You're not welcome here, Judd. Eli's voice was a low growl. Get on your horse and ride out. Now, is that any way to greet family? I came all this way to see you, to see your pretty little life, the life you bought with my money. That was blood money, and you know it. I wanted out. You wanted to keep going. And look where it got us. Judd's voice rose, laced with venom. You, with your land and your wife and your kids and me? I've been drifting, scraping by while you got to play pretend. You made your choices. Did I? Or did you make them for me when you ran out on me at Black Creek? Judd laughed, a sour, ugly sound. But I'm not here to talk about old times. I'm here to collect, with interest. There's nothing for you here. Oh, I think there is. Judd's voice dropped, becoming silky and dangerous. I hear Jane had a bit of an accident. Tragic. Such a delicate thing. Too delicate for a man like you, Eli. She needed someone with a bit more fire. Someone like me. Clara heard a scuffle, a grunt of effort. She held her breath. You stay away from her name, Eli roared. Or what? You'll kill me? You didn't have the stomach for it then. You don't have it now. You were always soft. The silence stretched. From her hiding place, Clara could picture the standoff. The two brothers bound by a secret crime, now facing each other over the ruins of a life. Get off my land, Eli said, his voice deadly calm. I'll go, Judd said. For now. But you tell Jane I said hello. He knew. He must have known Jane was dead. He was torturing him. And give my love to the girls, especially the little one with her mother's eyes. The sound of hoofbeats faded away. Clara waited, her heart hammering. A full minute passed, then another. Finally, she pushed the flour sack away and creaked open the cellar door. The kitchen was empty. She stepped out, her eyes scanning the room. Everything was still, too still. She crept to the front door and looked out. Eli was standing in the middle of the yard, his back to her, his shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. Judd was gone, but he had left something behind. Tied to the front gate post, fluttering in the cold wind, was a small, faded piece of blue ribbon. It was the exact kind of ribbon Jane used to tie in Grace's hair every single morning. It was a message, a promise. I can get to them whenever I want. The psychological war had begun, and Judd had just fired the first terrifying shot. The next days were a slow-motion nightmare. The ranch, once a quiet sanctuary, became a prison. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Eli became a ghost in his own home. He barely spoke, barely ate. He just patrolled. He walked the perimeter of his land from sunup to sundown, a rifle in his hands, his eyes constantly scanning the ridge. At night, he didn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the front door, the rifle across his lap, watching, waiting. The girls felt the change. They retreated further into their silence, two small ships lost in a storm of adult fear. Judd didn't show himself, but his presence was everywhere. One morning, Clara went to the well to draw water and found a dead crow floating in the bucket, its black eyes staring up at her. She said nothing, just emptied it and scrubbed it clean before Eli or the girls could see. A few days later, Willa's favorite doll, the one with the cracked button eyes, vanished from the nursery. Clara found it the next day, hanging by a piece of twine from a low branch of the sycamore tree. Its head was torn off. Clara buried it in the garden, her hands shaking with rage. This was a new level of cruelty, a violation aimed directly at the heart of their fragile family. She continued to read Jane's diary in secret, seeking clues, seeking anything that could help them. The pages revealed a woman tormented. Jane had been assaulted by Judd years before, long before she met Eli. It was a secret she had carried in shame. When she became pregnant with the twins, a terrible fear had taken root. What if one of them... What if... He says Willa has his eyes, Jane had written. He whispers it to me when Eli's not around. He says he'll be back for his property. He's not talking about the money. He's talking about my child. Clara felt sick. Judd's taunts weren't just random cruelty. They were part of a calculated, monstrous plan to claim one of the girls as his own, to destroy Eli by stealing his family, piece by painful piece. The breaking point came during a storm. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind howled like a grieving animal. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the very foundations of the small house. It was the perfect cover for a monster to move in the dark. Eli had barricaded the doors. He and Clara sat in the main room, the girls huddled on a pallet of blankets between them. The only light came from the fireplace, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Then a knock at the door. It wasn't a frantic, wind-blown sound, it was slow, deliberate. 3 heavy thumps that cut right through the roar of the storm. Eli raised his rifle, his face grim. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. "Eli!" Judd's voice called from the other side, impossibly loud. "I know you're in there. A storm like this brings back memories, doesn't it? Reminds you of that night at Black Creek, the thunder, the rain, the look on that old man's face right before you." "Shut up!" Eli bellowed. "You think you can hide from it? You built this whole life on a lie. You think Jane didn't know? She knew what you were. She was terrified of you. That's why she came to me." Clara saw the poison of Judd's words seeping into Eli. He was starting to doubt everything. "She told me things, Eli. Things she never told you. She said she couldn't stand your silence. She said you looked right through her. She said she needed a real man." This was it. This was Judd's endgame, to shatter Eli's mind before he shattered his home. "And she told me one of those girls was mine," Judd roared, his voice cracking with mad triumph. "You've been raising my blood, brother! Living in my house, raising my kid!" Eli staggered back, his face a canvas of horror and disbelief. The rifle wavered in his hands. He was breaking. Clara knew she had to do something. This couldn't happen. In a split-second decision, Fueled by desperation and love for her nieces, she stood up. She walked to the door, Jane's diary clutched in her hand. She took a deep breath, and before Eli could stop her, she unbolted the door and threw it open. Judd stood on the porch, drenched and wild-eyed, a triumphant sneer on his face. The sneer vanished when he saw her. "Who the hell are you?" Clara held up the diary, its leather cover gleaming in the firelight. "My name is Clara," she said, her voice ringing out with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "And this is Jane's diary. She wrote it all down, Judd." She took a step out onto the porch, into the storm. She wrote about Black Creek. She wrote about your cruelty. She wrote about how you hurt her and stalked her. Clara locked eyes with the monster on the porch, and she wrote how she knew, without a single doubt, that both of her beautiful daughters belonged to Eli, every last drop of their blood. It was a lie, a desperate, magnificent lie spun from the truth of the diary. She was using his own tactics against him. Judd stared at her, then at the diary, his mind racing. Could it be true? Could Jane have left proof that would undo all his claims? The confidence in his eyes flickered, replaced by a flash of panic. Enraged, his plan crumbling, he let out a guttural roar. He wasn't just here to talk. He lunged, not at Clara, but toward the open doorway, toward the children. But Eli was there. His doubt had been replaced by a surge of protective fury. He met Judd's charge with a brutal shove, sending him stumbling back off the porch into the mud. "You will not touch them!" Eli snarled. From the darkness behind Judd, two more figures emerged. He hadn't come alone. One of them held a lit torch, its flames hissing in the rain. The war of words was over. The barn was about to burn. The world erupted into chaos. The man with the torch didn't hesitate. He wheeled and flung it in a high, fiery arc toward the barn. It landed in the open hayloft with a soft whoomph, and in seconds, the dry hay ignited. Orange flames clawed at the dark, rainy sky. "No!" Eli screamed, a sound of pure anguish. The barn was his livelihood, his history. Judd's other man, a hulking shape in the dark, charged the porch. Eli was caught between them, his rifle aimed at Judd, who was scrambling up from the mud, a wicked grin on his face. He wanted Eli to choose, save his barn or save his family. But he hadn't counted on Clara. "Eli, the barn! I have the girls!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the roar of the fire and the storm. Before the big man could reach the door, Clara slammed it shut and threw the heavy bolt. She grabbed a cast-iron skillet from the stove, the first thing she could find, and stood her ground. She turned to the girls. "The plan we practiced. Now!" Grace, her face streaked with tears but her eyes determined, grabbed Willa's hand. They didn't go to the cellar. That was the trap. Instead, they scrambled to the back of the kitchen, to a small, loose panel behind the flour bins that Clara had discovered weeks ago. It led to the narrow crawl space under the house. It was a tight squeeze, but it was their only way out. Outside, Eli made his choice. He let the barn burn. He turned his rifle on the man charging the porch. He fired once, not to kill, but to maim. The man screamed and went down, clutching his leg. Judd saw his plan failing. He had underestimated them. He had underestimated the strange, fierce woman inside the house. He let out a roar of fury and pulled a pistol from his coat. Inside, Clara heard the shot. She shoved the girls through the opening. "Go! All the way to the big oak tree by the creek! Don't stop for anything! I'll be right behind you!" Grace nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Willa hesitated, her eyes wide with terror. "Aunt Clara," she whispered, using a name she couldn't have known. But in the chaos, Clara didn't register it. "Go, honey, run!" Clara pushed her through, then turned back to the kitchen, skillet held high, ready to face whatever came through the door. The front door splintered open. It was Judd, his face a mask of rage, his pistol aimed right at her. "Where are they?" he snarled. "Where did you hide my daughter?" "She is not your daughter!" Clara screamed back, swinging the heavy skillet with all her might. Judd fired. The shot went wide as he dodged, the bullet burying itself in the wall behind her. The skillet connected with his arm, and he howled in pain, the pistol clattering to the floor. He lunged for her, his hands like claws. But just as he reached her, a new sound tore through the night. The thunder of hoofbeats, not one horse, but a dozen. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness, cutting through the rain. The sheriff. Eli must have gotten word to him. Judd froze. He looked from Clara to the approaching riders, his face contorting in disbelief, trapped. But the final secret, the darkest one of all, had yet to be revealed. Eli appeared in the broken doorway behind him, his face bloody and grim. He wasn't holding a rifle. "It's over, Judd," Eli said, his voice heavy with a final, terrible sorrow. "It's all over." Judd turned to face his brother, a wild, cornered look in his eyes. "This isn't over! I'll be back! I'll tell everyone what you are!" "What am I, Judd?" Eli asked, taking a slow step forward. "A thief? A liar?" He took another step. "You think that's the secret of Black Creek? You think it was about money?" The sheriff and his men were dismounting, surrounding the house, their guns drawn. "The man who died at Black Creek." Eli's voice dropped to a pained whisper. "The paymaster you told everyone we robbed. That was a lie." Judd's eyes widened in confusion. "There was no paymaster," Eli said, the words tearing out of him. "There was only our father." Clara gasped. "He was going to kill you that night, Judd. Just like he'd beaten you 100 times before. He had the shovel raised. I couldn't let him. I couldn't let him hurt you again." Eli's eyes filled with tears. "I killed him. I killed our father to save you." The world seemed to stop. The rain, the fire, the shouting men. It all faded away. "The money," Judd stammered. "Was our mother's," Eli finished. "Hidden away so she could escape him. I took it so we could both run, so we could be free, but you twisted it. You turned our escape into a crime, you turned my protection into a debt." Judd stared at his brother, the foundation of his lifelong hatred crumbling into dust. His rage, his jealousy, his entire identity was built on a lie he had helped create. He let out a strangled, inhuman sound. It was the sound of a soul breaking. The sheriff stepped forward and put a hand on Judd's shoulder. "It's time to go, Judd. We've known the truth about your father for a long time. We were just waiting for you to commit a crime big enough to put you away for good." He looked at Eli. "Arson and attempted murder should do it." As they dragged the now empty shell of Judd Carrion away, Eli finally collapsed against the doorframe, the fight gone out of him. Clara rushed to his side. The girls were safe. The nightmare was over. But as he looked up at her, his eyes full of a new, raw pain, a final question surfaced. "How did you know?" he whispered. "How did you know what to say about the diary? How did you know how to fight him?" Clara knelt in front of him, among the splinters of his broken home, and finally let her own secret free. "Because my name isn't Clara," she said, her voice thick with tears. "It's Catherine." She reached out and took his hand. "And Jane. Jane was my sister." The silence that fell between them was heavier than any that had come before. It was the silence of two worlds colliding, of a truth so profound it remade everything. Eli stared at her, his mind struggling to grasp the revelation. This woman who had stormed into his life, who had cracked open his grief, who had stood against his demons. She was family, the very family he and Jane had run from. Her family. "They thought I wasn't good enough," he murmured, the old wound speaking. "Her family was wrong," Catherine said softly. "I was wrong. I spent 10 years looking for her. I was too late to save her, but I wasn't too late to save her daughters." She looked him in the eye. "Our nieces." He flinched at the word "our." It was too soon, too raw. The sheriff cleared his throat, bringing them back to the fractured present. "Eli, Catherine, we'll need your statements down in town. But for tonight, just try to rest." Rest felt impossible. The barn was a smoldering ruin. The house was a wreck. The deepest secrets of their lives lay exposed on the muddy ground. But for the first time in a long, long time, there were no more monsters hiding in the shadows. There were only the difficult, painful truths. They found the girls huddled under the oak tree, soaked and shivering but safe. Grace was holding a sleeping Willa, shielding her from the wind. When she saw Eli and Catherine approach, she didn't run. She just watched them, her old soul eyes trying to piece together the new shape of her world. That night, they didn't try to sleep in separate rooms. They dragged every blanket they owned into the parlor, the only room that wasn't damaged, and made a nest on the floor. Eli, Catherine, Grace, and Willa, a broken, battered, and bewildering new family. As the last embers of the barn fire died outside, Willa stirred in her sleep. She whimpered, not in fear, but in confusion. She rolled over and looked up at Catherine, her eyes barely open. "Auntie Kate," she whispered, "is the bad man gone forever?" Eli's breath hitched. Willa had known. Somehow, in the way that children just know, she had recognized the woman who looked so much like her mother. Catherine smoothed the hair back from Willa's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice a promise. "He's gone forever." Healing did not arrive with the sunrise. It arrived in small, awkward, painful steps. It was in the way Eli and Catherine moved around each other in the kitchen, two strangers bound by the most intimate of tragedies. It was in the way Grace watched them, her silence now one of observation, not of fear. They decided to read the rest of Jane's diary, together. They sat at the kitchen table, the book open between them, and let Jane's words tell the final parts of her story. They read of her deep, abiding love for her quiet husband. They read of her terror of Judd and the shame that kept her from telling Eli the full truth about the assault. And in the final, tear-stained pages, they found her answer to the question that had haunted them all. I look at my girls, and I see Eli. In Grace's stubborn chin, in Willa's quiet way of watching the world. Judd can claim what he wants. He can scream his lies, but I know the truth. A mother always knows. They are Eli's. They are mine. They are good. The words were a release, a pardon. The ghost of that question was finally laid to rest. It didn't matter what blood said. It mattered what a mother's heart knew. They began to rebuild. Not just the barn, but the family. Men from town, led by the sheriff, came to help raise new timbers. The women brought food and sat with Catherine, sharing stories, knitting the fractured family back into the community. Catherine taught the girls to bake, her hands covered in flour next to theirs. Eli taught them how to track deer, his quiet patience a language they all understood. He and Catherine didn't talk much about the future. They were too busy surviving the present. But sometimes, across the dinner table, their eyes would meet, and a silent understanding would pass between them. We are still here. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year later, Catherine stood on the porch of the rebuilt barn, watching the girls chase each other through the golden pasture, their laughter echoing in the clean, cool air. The ranch was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the sound of peace. Eli came and stood beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. He was smiling, a real, easy smile that reached his eyes. "They look happy," he said. "They are," Catherine said. "We all are." He turned to her, his gaze serious. "I never thanked you, Catherine, for coming back, for saving us." "You don't have to thank me," she said. "Jane would have done the same for me." She paused, then added, "This is my home now, Eli, if you'll have me." He didn't need words. He just reached out and took her hand, his large, calloused fingers wrapping around hers. It wasn't a gesture of frantic passion, but of something far deeper, of partnership, of belonging. The deepest secrets are the ones that fester in the silence. They can tear a family apart, turn a home into a prison, and make ghosts of the people we love. But sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to break that silence, to face the monsters in the dark, and to prove that the family you build is stronger than the one you're born into. If you were on the edge of your seat through the Carrion family's harrowing journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next story we have waiting in the shadows.